You wake to the sound the whole city wakes to most mornings this time of year, a low, steady murmur of thousands of people already moving before the light has fully settled over the river valley. Baskets creaking against hips, dogs barking somewhere down toward the water. The particular rhythm of a community that has done this same enormous task so many times, it barely needs discussing anymore. From where you sleep, you can already see it rising above the rooftops. The great earthen mound that has been growing, one basket load at a time, for longer than anyone currently alive has been counting. Your job this season is coordination rather than carrying, though your own shoulders remember exactly what carrying feels like from years you spent doing nothing else, the particular ache that settles into the base of your neck by mid-afternoon and never quite leaves by the time you sleep again. You stand near the base of the mound's newest section, directing lines of workers as they climb, empty baskets swinging on the way up, full ones balanced carefully on the way down, a relay that has been repeating itself in roughly this same shape since before your grandmother's grandmother watched it happen. Nobody here thinks of this as extraordinary. It is simply Tuesday, if your people kept a word for that. The mound itself, when you actually stop to consider it rather than simply work around it, is difficult to hold in your mind all at once. Its base alone covers ground that would take a good while to walk around entirely, layers of different colored earth stacked with a precision that isn't accidental, each basket load placed with at least some thought toward how it will settle against everything beneath it.
You've heard visitors from distant trading posts describe it as the largest thing they've ever seen built by hands rather than found already standing in the world, and you've stopped correcting their surprise, mostly because you understand it. You remember still being handed your first basket as a child, too young to be genuinely useful yet, your grandfather walking beside you the whole first climb, not carrying anything himself, simply making sure you understood exactly where to set your feet on the packed earth ramp so you wouldn't slip and spill what little you were carrying. He told you that a mound this size was never built by anyone's strength alone, only by everyone's patience together, one basket after another, for longer than any single person's lifetime could account for by itself. You didn't fully understand what he meant back then. You understand it considerably better now, standing here directing other people's children of the same worn path. Word reaches you mid-morning that you're needed elsewhere, at the great circle of tall cedar posts standing in the open ground beyond the mound's shadow, the one your people use to read the sun's yearly path, the way other communities might read a stack of counted knots. The important gathering tied to the sun's furthest turn is only days away now, and someone has noticed something wrong with one of the posts responsible for marking exactly where that morning light needs to fall. You've spent enough seasons around this circle to understand roughly how it works, even though the finer calculations belong to people who've studied it far longer than you have.
Certain posts, sighted from the center, mark precisely where the sun rises on the specific mornings that matter most to the calendar your entire community quietly depends on. Planting decided by it, ceremony decided by it, the whole rhythm of the year checked against a circle of wood standing in a field. When you arrive, the senior keeper of this particular knowledge is already crouched at the base of the post in question, expression carefully unreadable in the way people get when a problem is worse than they're ready to say out loud yet. The post has shifted, not dramatically, but enough. Ground that held firm through years of ordinary weather has softened unevenly beneath it, tilting the post's angle by a margin small enough that a stranger walking past would never notice, and large enough, sighted precisely from the circle's exact center on the one morning that actually matters, to place the sunrise noticeably off from where the community's entire calendar insists it should be. You crouch down beside the keeper and see immediately what has him so quiet. This isn't a post that simply needs straightening. It needs to be reset with the same care that placed it here the first time, and there are only a handful of days left to be completely certain it's done correctly before the sun stops waiting for anyone's schedule. Somewhere behind you, you're aware of the mound-building relay still continuing without pause, baskets rising and falling, a reminder that the rest of the city's rhythm doesn't stop simply because this particular problem has landed in your hands. The two of you don't panic, mostly because panicking has never once fixed a leaning post. What you do instead is measure, carefully, against the two neighboring posts whose alignment nobody currently doubts, checking the disputed post's angle against sight lines that have held steady for years, cross-referencing your findings with an older keeper's memory of exactly where the post originally stood before the ground beneath it began quietly failing.
A small crowd of curious onlookers gathers at a respectful distance, sensing without being told that something here matters more than the ordinary maintenance they're used to seeing. It is slow, careful work, the kind that rewards patience considerably more than it rewards confidence, and for a while neither of you says much at all beyond the occasional short correction to the other's measurement. By mid-afternoon, you've settled on the post's correct position, not through guesswork but through the accumulated, unglamorous evidence of measurement stacked against measurement, and the labor of actually resetting it, digging carefully around its base, packing new earth firm enough to hold against another season of unpredictable ground, takes considerably longer than the diagnosis did. You work through it together, checking the angle repeatedly against the horizon and against each other's eye, unwilling to trust the job finished until you've confirmed it more times than strictly feels necessary. You test what you can before the light fully fades, sighting along the corrected post toward the horizon where the mound itself rises in the distance, a deliberate part of the circle's design that lets a single practiced eye judge, even without the specific morning in question, whether a post is roughly telling the truth. It looks right.
It looks, more importantly, like every other correctly aligned post around this same circle has always looked, unremarkable, in exactly the way a properly working calendar should be. Walking back toward the mound as the light goes long and gold across the valley, you pass traders unloading goods that reminds you, the way it always does, how far this community's reach actually extends. Pale shell carried up from distant southern coastlines, worked copper that started somewhere near the cold northern lakes, dark stone brought from mountains you've heard described secondhand more times than you could count, sheets of pale glittering mica that catch the last of the day's light like something the traders carried down out of the sky itself rather than out of the ground. Someone nearby is already sorting the shell by size, setting aside the finest pieces for whoever will eventually shape them into the ornaments worn at the coming ceremony, work that depends, in its own quiet way, on the very post you spent your afternoon resetting. None of it arrived here by accident. All of it arrived because enough people, over enough generations, decided this particular stretch of river valley was worth the distance required to reach it. By evening, the day's basket work has added another visible layer to the mound's climbing shoulder, indistinguishable to anyone who wasn't there that morning from every other layer beneath it, and somewhere behind you, quietly, a post that could have thrown an entire community's calendar out of alignment has been reset carefully enough that no one attending the coming ceremony will ever know it happened at all. You find both facts satisfying in roughly the same unglamorous way. Neither one made for an exciting story.
Both of them, done correctly, are the actual reason any of this keeps working at all. Centuries after your lifetime, this entire city would eventually empty out, its people moving on for reasons later generations could only partially reconstruct. The great mound left standing, while the wooden circle beside it slowly rotted and vanished entirely, swallowed by the same unhurried patience of weather that the post you fixed had once quietly fought against. For a long time afterward, outsiders who eventually encountered the mound assumed almost anyone except the actual ancestors of nearby indigenous nations must have built it, inventing theories about wandering ancient travelers from entirely different continents, rather than simply crediting the obvious considerable skill of the people who had clearly lived here. It wasn't until archaeologists digging through salvage excavations ahead of new highway construction in the 20th century noticed a very particular, very deliberate pattern of post holes in the ground, holes that had once held exactly the kind of circle you helped repair, that anyone outside the oral traditions of descendant communities began to seriously reconsider what this place had actually been. One researcher, studying the pattern more closely than anyone had bothered to before, noticed something the post hole seemed to be quietly insisting on, that specific posts, sighted from the circle's center, lined up precisely with the horizon points where the sun would have risen on the exact mornings your community once organized its entire year around. It took him time to convince others the pattern wasn't coincidence.
Careful measurement eventually confirmed what those post holes had been quietly insisting the whole time: a genuine, precisely built solar calendar. Its posts aligned with a level of accuracy that took dedicated modern surveying instruments to fully appreciate, aimed with deliberate care at the very same mound whose shoulder you once helped raise, one basket at a time. The mound you helped build still stands today, its base larger than the footprint of some of the most famous monuments anywhere else in the ancient world, built entirely without wheels, draft animals, or metal tools,
by a level of coordinated human effort that modern visitors, standing at its base, still tend to find difficult to properly hold in their minds all at once. You never doubted it could be done. You watched it happen, one basket at a time, for your entire life.